Paul Israel, friend for I don't know how many years. Nice to have you on the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Adam. It's decades, not years, decades.
Decades. For those, I often say this, but it's actually true of you too. There are two types of people in the world. There are people who know Paul Israel and those who truly wish they knew Paul Israel. Um, just such a wonderful man. For those who are unfortunately in the second category, Paul is the executive director of the Israel Australia Chamber of Commerce, which is the twin organisation of Leon Kempler and Marcus Mandy in Melbourne, the Australia Israel Chamber of Commerce, so the twin. And you're also, I know, the Victorian government, representative of the Victorian government's trade office, which we'll unpack in a minute, right?
Sure.
Paul Israel is also, and I use the phrase, it's an old phrase in the right sentence. He is a wonderful man about town. Paul, who you don't know in Israel is not worth really not knowing. You're incredibly well connected, and we're very privileged to have you come on the show. And we're going to talk about the work that you do. But before that, tell us about you. Tell us about an Aussie from Melbourne ending up in Israel, family.
Yeah.
Unpack it all for us.
Sure. So, Adam, so thank you for the kind words, and I really cherish our friendship and our relationship. It's a two-way relationship. I think we get we both get and we both give and get from it. So I really enjoy it, and it evolves. It's evolved over the years. Before I say anything, just what's really important in everyone's mind is the unconditional and immediate release of the 59 hostages. It's hard to believe that just over an hour from here in the car, there's 59 Israelis in the Hamas dungeons. 24 of them we expect are alive, and the rest unfortunately being killed. And we need them home ASAP. So I want to start off with that, if you don't mind, Adam.
Oh,
And
man.
especially as this evening we're going into Remembrance Day, and the next day Independence Day. So that was important for me to say. So Paul Israel is the name. That's my real name. Born in Melbourne. Was very fortunate to go to Mount Scopus from kindergarten to year nine. And then with my parents, we moved to Israel. We made Aliyah in 1983. I did high school here. I did 3 years army. I served in a tank corps. I joined the army in August 1987. For those who know their history, in December 1987, there was a car accident in Gaza, and the first intifada broke out. It was an Israeli truck driver that had an accident. Two Palestinian children were killed, unfortunately. And we were sent as one of the first units to Jabalia. So Jabalia, we hear in the news day in, day out, unfortunately. And we're supposed to be there for 2 days, ended up being there for 3, 4 months, experiencing the first intifada. I was barely 4 years in Israel. And it was a very special experience to be defending the country and really going deeper into what this country is all about. Did my 3 years, spending time also in Lebanon. Finished the army, went back to Australia to study and work. Did arts marketing at Monash. Was very involved with AUJS, Australian Union of Jewish Students, and was very lucky to bring 3, 4 student groups to Israel on birthright type trips. Absolutely incredible experience. My parents were still living here at the time, so it was a great way to see them and see the country. And then, as I was finishing my studies, there was an ad in the Jewish News for executive director of the Australia Israel Chamber of Commerce, which you mentioned before, Adam, AICC. And again, very, very lucky to get that role and to work with Leon Kempler in the mid 90s, doing the luncheons and trade missions. Unbelievable experience. That's where you and I first met. And then I moved back to Israel in the late 90s. So I'm 55, been living in Israel now all up for 34 years and 2 stints, 7 years as a teenager and a soldier, and the rest here as an adult. I live in Rehovot, which is about 20k south of Tel Aviv, 60k north of Gaza, which I've just described. Have an Israeli wife, three boys. One just finished the army 2 weeks ago, my oldest son. My middle son is still in the army. He's serving near Eilat. And my youngest son is in year 11. And so that's my story. Most of my career has been with the Chamber, which is really, I won't call it a job. It's just a dream experience because I love Australia and Israel, and it's all about bringing those two countries together. So that's me in
And
short, Adam. Thank you.
thank you, Paul. And I want to go to the conversation around the chamber, but let me ask in a general sense, an Aussie, true blue, right? Even follows football. You're in Israel now for what, from 1983. Now you're 40 years. You're over 40 years in
Yes.
Israel. The arc of history that you have observed, the arc of Israeli society that you have both participated in and watched, how would you describe that experience over those 4 decades in Israel? How would you describe you and your part in that story, and how would you describe the evolution of Israel in those 4 decades?
No, great question. So the country's changed and I've changed. First of all, to think of Jewish history of thousands of years of diaspora and not having a country, so to have the opportunity to actually live here and be part of it is an absolute privilege. It's just I don't have the words to describe it. So that's number one. Moving here as a teenager, though, was difficult. You know, I went to Mount Scopus. I grew up in Doncaster, and it was a very sort of secure type of childhood. And then to move here was challenging. It was very, very hard to have a social life, understand the school lessons, etc. And it was in the army where I actually fell in love with the country and the people and what the country stands for. Really interesting. And the country has just improved and got stronger and better. So you look at the headlines, and often it could be doom and gloom and negative and all the tensions and chaos. But really, the country just gets better and better as the years go by. The quality of life improves. The lifestyle is unbelievable. The people, the quality of the people is just so unique. And in this terrible war, we're seeing them rise to the top, where it's people led this revival that we're going through. And I feel now the quality of life and lifestyle isn't that different anymore to what was in Australia. So when I came in the 80s, it was night and day. It was like going back to prehistoric times, the quality of life here. But now the quality of life here, I feel, is as good and sometimes even better than Australia. Not that it's a competition, but you can really lead a comfortable, fun, and active life. And I'm really lucky to be part of that here.
Yeah. And what's your impression of Israel post October 7th? It's a wedge in Israel's history. It's a deep, deep wedge, and nothing like it. I think, including 73, doesn't come near it. But
So I think what we're going through, it's not just Israel, it's also the Jewish people worldwide. There was literally just yesterday a program on Channel 12 about the anti-Semitism in Australia. And I think it's really important to say that Israelis get it and feel it, not just what we're going through here, but what world Jewry are going through, and in particular in Australia. And no one's proud or happy of what your community is going through, Adam. So I think really important to say we're all in this together. And I think now that diaspora Israel divide is not what it used to be, and it really is sort of there's a coming together of the two communities. We are still in the war as we speak, so it's really hard to say post-war because we're not really post-war. And I think what's really important is the way the media, society, community are honoring the victims of the 7th of October. It's unbelievable, Adam. I was watching TV just a moment ago, the stories of those heroes that fell on that day, the soldiers, the victims from the Nova Party, etc. And so we're still in a grieving mode and a revival mode and a defending mode. So it's multiple things simultaneously, which is what Israel is about. On the other hand, you do have some pre-October 7 tensions rising with the law reform, etc., and different tensions between the community. But that's Israel. You've got these positive energy, and on the other side, less positive, I'll say, I won't call it negative. And that this friction, I think, is what keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good description, Paul. We could analyze Israeli society forever and a day, but what I love is from your perspective as an Australian, I mean, who's made you're Israeli now fully and completely, but you come back and forward and you get that lens. You're able to sort of zoom out and see it, and then zoom into it because you have sons in the army and all of that going on. Um, let's talk about the chamber. You've led, I don't know how many, unless you have the number, but the word in my head is countless um, business missions between Israel and Australia. Let's start with one story, right? Share, if you can, a particular mission that fundamentally changed how an Australian company or a government official or someone viewed Israel and specifically Israeli innovation. What was that, and what was the key takeout from that?
So I think it's really important if you can just zoom out for a second to give a bit of context of why an Australian business people would bother to visit here. A business person would bother visiting Israel. So when I moved here in the 80s, the economy was an absolute basket case. We had a hyperinflation of 400% per annum, double-digit unemployment touching 20%, and it wasn't pretty. And we're a country of no resources, exact opposite of Australia, two-thirds desert, no water. And the country is now an economic miracle. And that is why people come here. They come for various reasons. One is to look for solutions for their problems back home, which I'll touch on in a second. And two is how to create this ecosystem. So I don't have a particular story of a particular company. It's really just the overall effect and what we do and why we do what we do. And so ultimately now Israel is a full member of the OECD. It was one of the fastest growing economies in the OECD last year, and this is wartime. Our unemployment is similar to Australia, and 50% of our exports are innovation, high tech related. And it's really important to have that context because we're a very small market. The cost of employment is not cheap. You don't come here for cheap labor. And therefore, the innovation, the technology in this region, in this market, is unique and is important for the future of Australia. So Australia being paradise for all the reasons that we know, including the resources and raw materials, the abundance of them, and the agriculture. But we also know the Australian universities are world class when it comes to the R in R&D. When it comes to the D, the development and the commercialization, Australia's ranked quite low in the OECD. And so what our role is as a chamber, beyond just promoting trade, is actually helping Australia see what can be done and how to create the ecosystem. And that's ultimately what we're doing day in, day out, beyond just the trade. So really most chambers are about import exports, we're that as well, but much more than that. And it's this thought leadership. And so over the years, we've hosted C-level executives from the largest banks, the largest retailers, the largest mining companies, telecommunication companies, and they've all come for those two reasons. We have a problem back home. Does an Israeli company have the solution? But then two, me, the CEO of a bank in Australia, I care about the future of Australia and the future of our industry. How do we create innovation in our ecosystem? And that's really what it's all about. And so when you go now to the CBDs in Melbourne and Sydney and go into any of those large boardrooms, nearly all of them will have been to Israel, and all of them will speak favorably about their visit here and how it's affected their innovation policy going forward. And that's really sort of it in a nutshell.
That's a that's a fantastic description of fundamentally what your work is about. So let me ask the follow-up question. Israel, in 40 years has become And everybody knows it, Startup Nation, very famously described by Dan Signor and sing, beautiful description. Whenever I bring a mission, I always give them a copy of the book to read before they come. We know all the ingredients. We know how it works. You need to have brilliant research. You need to have venture capital. You need to have the multinationals. And I think Israel, if correct me, has over 400 or 300 headquartered multinationals. Australia has, numbers of fingers of a hand. You need to have government. You need to have all the things in place. It's a known thing. So why is Australia so poor at it? And I'm describing it not as an assumption that people know we're not good at R&D. We're not good at commercializing what we develop. We are brilliant in the research, as you said. Our universities are top. And I'll talk about the mission of the university people I brought over with you a few years ago. But what's missing on our side that Israel has that we know that we should replicate?
Great question. So it's a few things. The two big things are a sense of urgency and a purpose. And it always comes up that these first-time visitors to Israel will say by day 3, day 4, they recognize that Israel has those two things, and Australia, I won't say is lacking, needs to strengthen those two things, a sense of urgency and a purpose. But to be fair to Australia, the innovation ecosystem there is unbelievable compared to what it was a decade ago. There were hardly any venture capital funds 10 years ago. Now there's dozens managing billions of dollars. There was no real startup scene. Now you go to a cafe in Australia, you're going to see someone on a laptop in jeans working on a startup. It exists. It's there. It's accepted. And the other thing is you've got in Australia two giants, and there are probably some other ones, but the ones that come to mind would be Atlassian and Canva, who are phenomenal. They're global. They dominate their space, and their revenues are in billions and billions of dollars in market cap. I think Atlassian one stage was over 100 billion, probably now it's less. But these are giants. And so the Australian ecosystem has come across in leaps and bounds. But I think, Adam, what is really interesting, this comes up on our missions and delegations that you brought over, is the cultural aspects. So the engineering and the technology is important, and that there's you can put dollars behind it and invest, but it's the cultural elements that Israel excels in. And this is what fascinates the Australian people. I'll maybe touch them very quickly to explain. So the one thing is the concept of celebrate success. So in Israel, like Australia, we have a tall poppy syndrome. So if you're in property or banking, you'll be smacked in the media and there'll be a lot of criticism of your wealth and what you've done. But if you're in high tech, Adam, you are revered. You are revered by the community, by your peers, and by the media. And the celebrating success is super important. And it's a bit like in Australia, you win a grand final and you celebrate that success. That is what Israel does. And that's something that Australia needs to strengthen. On the flip side is the attitude of your community, your investment community, the government, to failure. Innovation and startups are a very risky business. Australia has a pioneering spirit. Often people now say, I'm not looking to bag Australia, but there's nanny state elements in parts of society and the culture of Australia. But in Israel, failure is accepted. People want to make sure you've done nothing untoward or illegal, but it's respected. And often if you meet some of the world's top venture capital funds that are here in Israel, they will prefer to invest in an entrepreneur that has failed as opposed to someone who had 5 years at one of the bigger accounting firms. And so this attitude to failure is a big, big deal. And it's something that Australia needs to work on. And that is with government and education and media. The other thing is questioning authority, which is a Jewish trait. And Australia has become more and more conforming and a bit hierarchical, and it's losing a bit of its casual informality. And the questioning authority is really, really important. We had a visit, I'm happy to mention, talking about football. Brendan Gale, who's the CEO of Richmond Football Club, they were in the doldrums for decades. and he wanted to come to Israel and learn about the leadership and motivation and team building. I'm a Carlton supporter, but I'm still happy to host him. And we went to actually meet a whole lot of the elite units in the army. And the thing that was just sort of counterintuitive, you think of army and discipline and regime and order, where in these elite units, they encourage the soldiers to debate with the commanders and question authority. And this is really, really key to create an innovation ecosystem. And the last element, just to touch on, is just the concept of chutzpah, that Yiddish concept of just going for gold, going, reaching for the stars, which is all part of course of not being scared to fail, etc. So it's these cultural elements that Israel excels in, and Australia needs to strengthen.
You taught me that on a mission, if you recall, when I brought Kim Carr over, Senator Kim Carr as he was, and we met with Dov Moran, and you set us up with Dov. And Dov Moran, listeners, is the accredited inventor of the USB stick. And we met with him and we had 30 minutes. And if you remember, it went like over an hour. And it was fascinating insight. And he told us the story. He said, when he gets interviewed by, or when he interviews, sorry, people with startups looking for money, one of the questions he asks them is, how many startups have you done before? And if they say none, he says, I'm not interested. And if they've had at least 2 failures, my ears prick up. And it was a moment of cultural clash in our group. And I remember Kim Carr just sort of sitting up going, oh, it was the realization of that word failure. In Australia, it's a strike. In Israel, it's not a strike, it's a stripe. And I mean a stripe of,
Great way.
yeah, the correct way. And it was an amazing experience. It was amazing meeting him that way.
Maybe I just might talk about one example of that and how government funding is connected to that concept, Adam. So a lot of your viewers or listeners might know the story of Better Place, which was a company that was competing with Tesla in the whole electric car space, and their technology was about swapping the batteries in electric cars. And they were way ahead of their time, and they
Yes,
raised close to $1 billion US,
yes,
including Israeli government funding. Long story, it ended up being a failure. And the media didn't take the government apart for investing in this risky business. As a result of the Better Place failure, we now have one of the world's best, largest car industries. And thinking of growing up in Victoria, and you live in Victoria, Adam, where we had that amazing car manufacturing industry in Geelong and all those areas, which now unfortunately doesn't exist. We're now a world leader in this space. So what's called CASE, connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. There's 400 startups in that space. BMW, Porsche, Mitsubishi, etc., are all investing here, buying Israeli startups. And that is from a failure, which has created a new industry, including government funding.
yeah.
And it's very hard for government bureaucrats around the world and Australia to get their head around that and see how that builds new industries.
In the AI mission that you and I pioneered, that I took the professors from Australian Institute for Machine Learning and others from Monash and a few places, when we went on that mission and you took us around to AI, startups, you took us to government, and we were there with the Israel Innovation Authority, whose role is to fund startups. The penny drop of that mission was when the director of the Innovation Authority said, we had a bad year. And we're all looking at each other going, a bad year? And he goes, yes, we had an 8% success rate. We aim for our funding to be no more than 4%. And people talked about it, they still talk about it. Like the success rate was too high from the Innovation Authority. It was 8% when it was supposed to be 4%. And he said it to us like straight. And my guys were just like falling off their chair. That cultural difference in the stimulating of risk is just fundamental. And it goes
Is.
with
And so just
urgency, by the way, goes with urgency and speed.
goes with urgency. And just to sort of give a bit more to that is because we now have such a strong and large venture capital industry, there's more money here in VCs than the whole of Europe put together, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
So the government is saying we will fund things the private sector won't fund in order to create the new industries. And hence they're expecting a very high failure rate, but then hoping that will push to create new companies and new domains, etc. And it works, really works.
It does, but they're also, to be very clear, they're specific in what they will target.
Yeah.
I know that things like agritech, which I want to talk about, and health innovation and cyber, very specific targeting of government funding to those spaces. And we've seen it now in cyber. If I've got it right, Israel attracts 60% of the world's private
Over
capital
60. Yeah.
into cyber technology, right? And it's incredible. I mean, it's tens of billions of dollars. Climate solutions, which came out of, Israel is two-thirds desert. Um, let's talk about those sorts of things because the world is increasingly focused on tech transfer, on agri-tech and health innovation, climate. Just to shoot with me here, Paul. What do you see as the next sort of big thing? What's the next big sector um, and I'm thinking specifically for Israel Australia cooperation? Where is the untapped potential that we could be really working hard on?
Because we have more engineers per capita than anywhere else on the planet, it's really all industries, Adam. That's the challenge with this. It's like there's not an industry where technology is part of where Israel isn't strong or a leader. Having said that, the big thing now is the convergence of industries, right? The blending of industries that in the past weren't really relevant. So just go the most basic level, mining companies, we know how large they are in Australia. And we were really encouraging them to come to Israel, look at technology, but it wasn't on their radar two decades ago. Fair to say now that all the mining companies in Australia are big users of Israeli technology, and it's technology now is just everywhere in all industries. But the convergence of things like agri and bio are blending, medical and technology, quantum, and this is an area we know that Australia is doing quite well at and spending a lot of money. And I do see that I think it's going to be some great joint ventures in quantum between Israel and Australia in the years to come. Another topic where Israel's really ahead worldwide, Australia's catching up. I think when it does, it'll be profound, is alternative foods, alternative meat, alternative dairy. I think I told you, Adam, on one of the missions we had 2 years ago, went to a company here called Redefine Meat. And we was all a bunch of Aussie blokes, and they were all sort of giggling and thinking how this fake meat is going to be like just plastic. And everyone agreed it was the best steak they ever had in their lives. So if you just think of our cuisine and how important food is for safety and health of food, quality of food, that's an area that's going to be really, really interesting. And the last thing I'll mention is the Israeli government, Israel Innovation Authority, is setting up now a lab for biodevices and biochips. And basically a chip, which is the size of a fingernail, will be replacing a lab which is like square meters in size, and doing things like accelerating drug development, personal medicine, etc. So it's a very exciting future. And the more we can do between Australian institutions and Israel, the better.
That's a pretty wild example, replacing a lab with a chip. And I know part of that is AI, where we've spent some time together. How's the artificial intelligence field developing in Israel? And I'm predicating my comment with this. When we went over, and I think it was before COVID, we had that mission with you.
I think it was
Was-
2019, probably. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 19. It was literally 19. And what we saw was people unleashing the research and development into investigating where it would lead and what it would do, knowing government would create some boundaries for them, but not get caught up in the is this good for man? Is it bad for man? All the regulation and all of the cultural aspect of AI, which Australia seems to be more obsessed about than actually pursuing. And I hope we haven't missed another sector that we could have been world class in. And I know, my friends in Adelaide are world class, but how's AI going in Israel?
So we touched on cyber before, where Israel clearly is the dominant player globally, and it's the aim of the country to be the same in AI, and we're on track for it now. So I think in rankings we're like top three, top four in the world in AI. The big thing, obviously, that we're doing really well in is to do with bots and customer service. There was a company I met the other day called Insait, Insait, Israeli company. Um, and they are providing a bot for banking industry, and they could predict the questions you're about to ask, and can tailor make the answers, and you don't realize that it's an AI machine that's servicing you. And obviously, if you need human interaction, then obviously they'll transfer that. So this is talking about just high quality uh, customer service and efficiency, and really tailor made. And that's really where a lot of the Israeli companies are focusing their AI efforts. Then, of course, really it's in medicine, it's in agriculture, and it's everywhere. The Israeli government actually doesn't like to actually pick the favorites, but in AI it is, and really wants to be number one, two, or three, and that's a very ambitious goal, and I think we're on track to do it.
Yeah, that's a very deliberate strategy, given the military circumstances as well as the civilian circumstances, and it comes to get all the big nations are focusing their efforts on it. I think Australia's investment in AI is probably a startup's investment in some corner of the world. It's very sad, but let's not go there for the moment. Um, let's keep going on the theme of the missions. And by the way, do you know how many missions you have taken or have facilitated between Australia and
Sure,
Israel?
I think it's a few hundred, and we're talking about hosting personally, like met probably close to 10,000 people in the 30 years.
Extraordinary.
So it's a privilege. Often when I go to Australia, I'm in the CBD, I'm recognizing people like, oh, okay, which mission they're from. Um, but yeah, so the missions are addictive, they're unique, they're special, as you know. But it's thousands of people,
Yeah,
thousands.
yeah.
Yeah,
To to go to Israel is to know Israel. To
yeah,
read
yeah.
it in social media or the press is to not to understand it at any level whatsoever. But we
Well,
know
I can
that.
just tell you, Adam, the big thing for us, so pre-war, we were on track to host close to 40 groups in 2023. About 80% would have been non-Jewish first-time visitors. We do get recurring visitors, but a lot of first-timers. And our role is to do a tailor-made visit based on their objectives, and give them a great experience. But ultimately, and this was really nearly 100%, would get three sentences of gratitude, of summary of their experience. And I would say, best week of our lives. They'd say life changing. And they often say coming here is better for them than going to Silicon Valley, where they go looking at technology. And that really is the ultimate goal, is to go beyond their objectives and give them a lifetime experience that will be good for them as people, for their industry, and for Australia as a nation. And so it's something that we really, really enjoy and excel at.
Yes, and you're very good at it. In fact, you're the best at it. Let's talk about outcomes. How do you measure outcomes from these missions? You get the feedback, got it. Some businesses might continue with links that you may or may not know. How else do we know how successful this tremendous effort over decades has created?
It's really hard to measure like all the deals and investments that have happened, but we're talking about billions of dollars, like literally over the years. We're talking about different funds being set up specifically to invest in Israel that we helped encourage, facilitate, and introduce. Um, One of the things we do beyond missions is what's called technology scouting, where we actually, you've been to Israel, you can see there's a plethora of opportunities, and you want to have your finger on the pulse. And we then support you as a company in Australia and do monthly reports on the ecosystem, all the different deals that are going on, and then do a deep dive on a couple of companies that you may be interested in meeting with. And then we do what's called in-country support. So we'll help Adams Sonham Industries create a relationship with a company in Israel, bridge that cultural communication gap, help milestones be achieved, and act as that intermediary and that bridge. And that really is the ultimate of it. At any given time, we've got half a dozen of such relationships that we're nurturing and servicing.
That's important. And I think you're right. It has created a change. There is a change in the Australian innovation ecosystem, slow and gradual, but there's no choice. We this is the world we're in. We don't make anything anymore. We're reliant. We know we are in a precarious position. Um, at the human level, what are some of the unique cultural? I mean, you've talked about the general cultural differences, but some of the business differences you've encountered when you've introduced Australian delegations to Israel. What are some of those, jarring
It's
moments, and how do you help Australians overcome these
sure.
differences?
So we actually find we're doing a lot of coaching and guidance beyond the actual business meeting. And we find that both sides, the Australian and Israeli side, are inquisitive of the other culture. Um, on one hand, there's a lot of similarities. Australians are very informal, Israelis are very informal, very casual. Um, the hierarchy is still different, but Australia's a bit more less hierarchical than other countries. So a lot of similarities, but there's still quite a few differences, which need a bit of translating and nurturing and massaging along the way. So even things like small talk, we go into some meetings and the Australians can sometimes spend 15, 20 minutes in small talk. And the Israelis would barely do one sentence of small talk. And so you're
Yeah.
always trying to help that fine balance where the small talk has a role in relationship building, but there's also a time management issue, there's an objective issue, and there's probably a sense of urgency issue. So the small talk may seem like a very sort of silly thing to mention, but it's real and it comes up all the
I,
time.
I hear it all the time. I get calls from people, Adam, I'm struggling with, this Israeli company that we're working with because they're just direct, and we like to, develop the relationship, and they're completely
Very
different
different.
ends of the
Very
people quadrant, like
And our goal is to help both sides, that both
yeah.
sides walk out satisfied. So that's a challenge. Another thing that's interesting is when Australians ask a question, often, I don't generalize too much, they're sort of apologizing. They're like, sorry to ask this question and apology in advance. I don't want to offend you.
Can I
Um,
ask if, and always that right at the front of the question. Yeah, yeah,
and that can be confusing for the Israeli. They're not really sure. Like, are they missing like a little hidden message
yeah.
or something? Um, a big thing with Israelis is to help them to listen because often they're going in, this is my pitch, this is my technology, and really we know in business it's all about the relationship. And so we're really trying to help the Israelis to ask the open-ended questions and listen to the answer, but also body language. And our body languages are different. The way we sit forward and sitting back, and the way we dress. Often, and you've seen this, Adam, the Australians will come here and dress down in their polo shirts and jeans, and the Israelis will overdress in their suits and ties, which they can't put on properly.
Yes.
Um, and and then also the whole thing of subtext. There's a lot of subtext with Australians. They'll
Yes.
use words like "that was interesting," "thank you," which sometimes means that wasn't interesting, and I don't really want to see you again. And Israelis will completely misread the room, and so we spend a lot of time in helping them translate what's actually going on beyond the words. So it's fascinating. It's a great challenge, and it's a really important part of the relationship.
The emotional intelligence is different. And
Correct.
that's at the fundamental. That's it. And I remember, I don't know, Paul, if it was you or someone who said to me once, he said, Adam, the difference in the way Israelis think about working with Australians is that they feel they should come to conquer Australian industry. And Australians don't have that attitude. They seek partnership. And often the partnerships don't work or the relationships break as they do. Very successful ones, and sometimes they do. And in my experience, I've just seen them collapse with that Israeli attitude of, we know better, we've got this, we'll just do it. It's
Element of
that
that, and then there's
conquering
things also
attitude.
also things to do with humor. I mean, there's often times when someone will tell a joke, like an Israeli will tell a joke about his mother-in-law who's Polish, but an Australian doesn't know what that means, and so these jokes, got to sort of tame them and say, you're not here to entertain; it's the relationship. So yeah, that's a big part of what we do, and it's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
A lot of fun.
Let's take that to the next step then, because the work that you do, as you're describing it now, it goes beyond business. You're touching on, well, you're touching on education, you're touching on diplomacy, you're touching on collaboration, between industries, and some of them challenging like defense, some of them less so like high tech and health. How do you think your work, Paul, contributes to the broader Israel Australia relationship beyond the trade numbers?
Sure. So obviously in geopolitics and now the war, there's so much to unpack when a politician comes to us. I often miss really what this country is about and what it stands for and why it does what it does. And just one simple thing, which when we get opportunity to meet a politician and show them the ecosystem, we shine a light on tikkun olam, right? Repairing the world. And so often, and Dovmaran's a great example, and some of the entrepreneurs you've met, Adam, who are squillionaires and have had exit after exit and don't need to work, or their grandchildren don't need to work ever. But they're still out there innovating and creating to do tikkun olam and repairing the world and giving value. And so I think what we try and do is to show that this country is values based. This is beyond democracy and freedom of speech. It's the values for a strong society, the amount of people helping the weaker side of society, low socioeconomic aspects, the minorities, the Arab minority, ultra Orthodox minority. There's a lot going on. Heaps of problems. We can talk about the problems from we're here in Timbuktu, but this tikkun olam on the micro level for Israel and then for global is real. And a lot of the politicians, when they actually sort of get their head around it, they do appreciate what Israel actually is all about and why we're here.
I had one of those moments, Paul, on one of our missions with you when we had dinner with Chemi Perez, the son of Shimon Peres, who is a venture capitalist. He's incredibly successful businessman, incredibly successful man in his own right, and we know his lineage, Shimon Peres, his son, and he was investing in Palestinian startups because, as he said to us over dinner, this is the way we find peace. He said, I grew up with my father and all of those political deals and all of the generals and all of the politicians. He said, but ultimately we just need to be able to do things like this, invest in each other. I've never forgotten it. It was a very powerful, powerful moment. Again, one of those pin drops. And there is a lot of that going on. There's a lot of it going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't read it here, you don't hear about it because, well, the politics of
But
normalizing relationships with Israel is all wrong, all of that.
it doesn't fit the narrative, and I think what's
No.
really interesting is the quality of a person who can accept that their narrative is being challenged. That's what it's all about. It's not
Yeah.
convincing, it's just showing them, and that it doesn't fit their narrative. They've got to shift. One example, talking like a Chemi Peres type individual, is Al Waldman, who was the founder of Mellanox. And he was bought out by Nvidia, the biggest company in the world that makes chips. Um, and he's like Chemi Peres, one of these guys who's investing in Ramallah and the West Bank, etc. He actually had an R&D center, a little manufacturing center in Gaza.
Wow.
His daughter, his daughter was killed at Nova on October 7. And then a couple of months later, they saw that under his facility in Gaza was a Hamas tunnel, like a terror tunnel. And so for that, what that individual has to go through, instill one, just being productive, but he's still giving back. He's not giving up. And
Wow.
that's what Israel's all about. And so if we can share that with some of the visiting politicians and that things aren't just black and white and give it more color, not convince, but challenge the narrative. That's something we're very proud to do.
When you say he's giving back or more now or he's continuing to do so, tell us a little bit about what
Well,
his
he wouldn't
activities
be
are.
doing it. He wouldn't be doing in Gaza, but I think he's still active in, say, Judea and Samaria activities with the Palestinians, etc. It
Right.
hasn't.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's not
He
someone
hasn't given up
who's
on he hasn't given up on the Palestinians.
dialogue,
Yeah,
dialogue, etc. Those sort of
yeah,
things.
yeah. Um, wow, that's a story. Paul, you also serve as the Victorian government's trade office in Israel.
Yep.
Tell us about that. How did that occur? Um, and what have you been doing? And then I want to start to talk about how you identify, companies or sectors that are good fit for Victoria. But what's the story there?
Sure. So the states in Australia, as you know, are very competitive to attract investment and to create their own economies, develop their own economy, sorry. And Victoria has about 20 plus offices around the world, which encourage investment and Victorian exports. David Southwick, member for Caulfield, when the Liberals were in power, led the way in bringing this into Victorian government, the whole concept of innovation, way ahead of his time. He helped create what's called VisTech, which is Victorian Israel Scientific Exchange. And David did an incredible job in getting that not just accepted, but real buy-in from the bureaucrats and other ministers. Then obviously Labor got in. Daniel Andrews is a very good friend of Israel and the Jewish people. Philip Dalidakis came here as a minister and led one of the first government-related cyber missions ever. And on that visit, he saw what was going on in cyber and other industries, and he said then and there, we need an office in Israel. We need to have a presence here, and I want the chamber to run it. And it happened. And Daniel Andrews came as premier about 1.5 years, 2 years later. And now the chamber is the Israeli representative of the Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office. We report into the UK. There, Victoria has what's called an agent general, which looks after Europe, UK, and the region. And it's something we're very, very proud of. And it's been running now for 4 or 5 years and was renewed under Jacinta Allen as premier. So it's really stood the test of time, war, and all the challenges that we know that are going on in the community in Victoria, in the parliament, etc. So that's sort of a bit of context at the high level. We have 2 staff that are dedicated to Victoria. One is a lady called Miriam Cyber, and her focus is all about promoting biotech and life sciences, which we know, again, Victoria is a world leader. with the Florey Institute, Doherty, Peter Mac, etc. And Miriam's role is to create joint research between those institutions and the Israeli equivalent, but then also industrial and companies. And the other person from the team is a guy called Benny Weitzman. He's looking after Invest Victoria, so helping Israeli companies are looking to invest in Asia and saying to them, how about you look at Australia, look in Australia, look at particularly in Victoria, and then there's a whole support team there and infrastructure that gives them a real hug and connects them, and then helping Victorian exporters to Israel. So that's a big part of what we do. We're national as a chamber, but give a bit of extra TLC to Victoria in this relationship.
So, what makes a partnership or an investment at this level a win-win? And I know you're reluctant to mention companies, but maybe even in the high-tech health area, which I know, there's a lot of great things happening, and there was recently. What have been some of the standout success stories
Yeah,
there, Paul?
sure. So the concept is really Victoria's looking to strengthen the innovation ecosystem. We spoke about it before, the challenges Australia has. And Victoria's really at the forefront of creating a strong high-tech sector. And from Israel, because of the size of our economy and the companies, it's not going to be a company that's going to open shop in Victoria, employ hundreds or thousands of people. It's a dozen, half a dozen. But what Victoria's looking to do is to create new industries and create little niches. And that's really what we're all about, is looking at these high-tech companies that are already global with a presence in the Americas, maybe a bit in Asia, a bit in Europe, and haven't yet got to Southeast Asia or Australia. And so we're really there to encourage them and connect them to Victorian government to set up shop. Usually it's one person, two people, and then grow from there. But probably the biggest success, which is a recent one, was the Sheba Arc Summit that Miriam led literally in March this year. Sheba is one of the biggest hospitals in Israel, Tel HaShomer Sheba, and they have an arm called ARC, which is all about innovation, the future of medicine, the future of health. And they have this ARC Summit, and they hadn't done one in Asia. And Miriam got this over the line to be set up to do the ARC Summit in Melbourne, literally a month ago. Unfortunately, I couldn't go. Miriam was able to go represent the chamber. And we had hospitals from all over the world come into Victoria to learn about the ARC model. We even had Adam, a hospital from Saudi Arabia, coming to an Israeli conference in Victoria. We had from America, Mayo, some leading hospitals in Germany, etc. We had Victorian government ministers in attendance. And if I understand, the 2-day conference was packed every day. And I think it was like 300 people constantly with multiple sessions simultaneously.
So give us
And
some
now that's on the
insight.
map.
Give us some insight into the inside of the conference. If you're attracting that audience global, what and you described it as innovation. What actually is the summit about, and what's it
Talking about
doing?
really the future of hospitals and healthcare, the challenge of limited beds and treating people in their homes, and that whole friction of managing that balance. A lot of lessons from COVID, obviously, which is really important that society still analyze went on. Big data. So what's really interesting here in Israel is we have HMOs, health medical organizations. Some of the biggest in the world are here, and they've been collecting data since the 70s. And the ability for them to see Joe Blow at age 17 had this particular sickness or health ailment, but then 20 years later he had this disease, and to find the correlation in the data is what Israel excels at. And now countries like Australia and around the world are collecting the data. They're only just starting.
Yes.
We're doing it now for decades. So it's the learnings, once how to collect, then analyze, and then create solutions. And the biggest thing really with data is all about predictive, to predict what's about to happen. Nothing's 100%, but you can have a high correlation and really save people's lives and improve quality of life. And that's really what it's all about.
We also, Paul, just on that point, I know when we we're on again our AI mission, there was a lot of if we have the right enough, we have the data, we have enough of it, we can start to predict health outcomes based on even environmental circumstances. And in Australia, we would say down to your postcode. So we
Yeah.
can predict population health outcomes from your postcode. It was one of the takeaways that we got from that. Not just the you can do the radiology thing. It's anyway. Congratulations! Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Very
And
exciting.
how did the Victorian government react to it?
They loved it. They're very proud of it. I mean, to have that quality of hospitals around the world come is a big deal. And as I said, there were a couple of ministers that were in attendance, and the reports are glowing. I mean, I'm still getting feedback, and the work that Miriam did in putting it together is just outstanding. So I think we'll see the results down the track.
Yes.
But the building blocks are there. I think in this environment, to have an Israel-related conference in Victoria and for it to go smoothly and successfully is huge.
Two
It's
things.
huge.
One, Miriam is a star. You and I both know that. Um, but that's a great example of your activities that go beyond business, that touches, diplomacy and collaboration and narrative challenging and all those other issues that we know go behind all this. Um, no wonder you said you're in your dream job, my friend. It's very clear. Uh, Practically, how do you identify which Israeli companies or technologies are a good fit for Victoria? How does
It's a good
that
question.
come about?
So there's different elements. One is the funding. Does this company have some depth to it? Some financial depth is really important. Are they experienced in having a presence outside of Israel? So Australia won't normally be the first market they'll go to. Sometimes it is. It's very interesting to mention that, but often their first presence will be in Europe or America. And so that's really important to see that they've gone through all those cultural challenges of going through all the bureaucratic hoops and hurdles you need to do. And then are they relevant to Australia and the region, to the economy? As we know, Australia's got huge telcos, huge retailers, huge banking, um, huge mining. So is there a market for them? And will they take it seriously? And so a lot of companies will find might have raised $30 million. They could be unicorns, they could be amazing companies, but they'll be honest and say, we don't have the resources to follow up. So that's, they're very upfront with us. And so we're going to find the company that has the right mix of all those elements, and the
Yeah.
timing is important.
Well, that's the professional job. That's what you're there to do, and you've been doing it long enough so the track record allows you to do that, I guess, quicker than a startup would have to do that as an office. Um, Fantastic. Paul, looking ahead now, what's your vision for the next, I don't know, number of years? Let's not say what
Sure.
that number is, it's not important. But what's your vision for the future of Israel, Australia economic ties? Um, and if there are any initiatives or directions you're excited about that our listening audience may not be aware of, share some with us.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is post October 7, we're still in recovery modes, a bit like COVID was, but this is a bit slower. Um, so we're still waiting for the sea level first time visitors to come back to Israel. So that's something that we're yearning for. Um, and obviously the war and the whole situation is directly related. So we're really hoping, one, the hostages come home ASAP. War is over, but war is over properly, not just over.
Yeah.
Um,
Not
and then people
temporarily,
have
but it's over for
over.
whatever
It's over.
period. Yeah.
It's over. And then people can have confidence and comfort in visiting here, even though it might sound really strange, probably one of the safest times to visit Israel, but it really is perception wise, that's different. So really looking forward, I think there's going to be pented up energy, which we had like post-COVID. And we're already seeing trickles of it, but that's a big thing we're waiting for. Next thing is we've got funds that are, say, not so dedicated to Israel, but are spending money in Israel. And we're really hoping we can get funds that will invest in both countries and creating joint ventures. Because at the end of the day, geographically, we're in different markets. I think we need to spend more time helping Israelis unlock the magic of Indonesia and Malaysia, the size of those countries, and how Australia has those relationships and the cultural insights of how to work with those markets. So we're really hoping that will be something that's around the track. And there's talk of Abraham Accords expanding. They're talking about Syria and Lebanon being part of it. It's being mentioned,
It's
right?
extra. The Syrian leader said, I mean, whether or not they're words, but then the first time we've heard those words, the leader of Syrian leader's
Incredible.
mouth. Listeners, for those who don't know, the new interim whatever Syrian leader came out the other day and said he would be interested, meeting an American congressman, he would be interested in joining the Abraham Accords. Now, for the
So to think of that, Adam, and then think of
just to
Indonesia and
say it,
Malaysia, yeah, exactly. It's huge. But then think
oh,
of two very big Muslim economies next door to Australia.
yeah,
Um, I think for us it's going to be a game changer. And so nothing would surprise me if either of those countries or both were to hopefully join a Saudi or an expanded Abraham Accords. And I think also with Saudi, it's quite amazing. We've actually had a few discussions with Australians based in Saudi Arabia looking to do things with Israel. Um, and so it's real. Like it's more than one conversation. These are like significant people, significant businesses. And if you look at the UAE in Israel, it's hard to comprehend. Um, I don't want to say, but I think it's important to say, probably feel safer wearing a kippah in Dubai than I would wearing in Melbourne, unfortunately, but that's the truth. Um, but on the positive side, just shows how real and deep that connection is. So I think the regions that both economies can play is something that we need to, I think, spend a bit more time on and try and get up one or two big companies that are real joint ventures, like joint manufacturing, joint exporting, etc. So
yeah.
I think with the goodwill and the thousands of people that we've hosted, I think that's something that's realistic down the track.
You know, there's a phrase that comes to mind, Paul, as you were describing the economics, the geopolitics, the populations. It's corny, but it's true. Sky's the limit. That's what you're describing, and you're in the chair to see it. You're in the chair to see it. It's an amazing thing. Um, Fabulous. Oh, by the way, the key to that, I think, if I've got it right, one of the keys that unlocks all of that, certainly from here to there, is the direct flights. Direct flight between
Would
Israel
definitely help.
and Australia.
Definitely
It would
help.
definitely
Definitely
help.
help. Definitely help.
You know,
No doubt.
my family, we were booked on that first direct flight in March, and COVID hit, so of course we didn't
COVID hit.
go. But we were really excited about getting off the plane in Israel as opposed to Bangkok or
Correct. But can you
wherever.
imagine like Indonesia, Malaysia having connection to Israel, then that whole direct flight becomes more important. So
Yes,
yeah, it's all there. It's all
and
there. And what's good is the airlines have tested um the numbers and what it looks like. So the road to there won't be as long as we think.
any news you can share with our audience on an insider's knowledge on direct flights between Israel and Australia, Paul?
Let you know. I'll let you know when I hear. Let you know.
Sorry?
So I'll let you know when I know something. I'll let you know.
Thank you. Um, Lastly, for any Australian entrepreneurs or investors or policymakers listening to this, what is the single most important piece of advice you'd give them about engaging with Israel? One. Two, what should they be doing today to prepare for tomorrow's opportunities that Israel can unlock for them?
So I think the big thing is to try and be as clear as you can about your intentions and not be too vague. Because sometimes people just start describing things and Israel doesn't understand what's his or her objective, what they're looking for. So be as clear as you can about what you're looking to get from the relationship. To not misinterpret um, the energy of Israelis of being ambitious. So sometimes Australians understate and undersell. I'm going to say the Israelis oversell, but they're very ambitious, and there's no choice. We're a small market, 10 million people, there's no region. You've got to, from day one, got to export and compete with the big boys. With Australia, you've got 25, 26 million people. You can sort of gradually build your business. So to understand, I think, I can't tell you to respect, but appreciate the ambition that local Israeli business people have, to not mistake the assertiveness for aggressiveness, and the straight talking. Not to be offended by the straight talking. If anything, I think enjoy the straight talking, because often in a meeting with an Australian business person, you really don't know what they're thinking. You're really second guessing, trying to strip the layers of what does that word mean and what do you mean by that. And in Israel, there's none of that at all. And I think to embrace the straight talking. So it's really more the cultural things. And the last thing to say, Adam, which you know as well, is that really Israelis, nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible.
Yeah.
They just take it on.
Yeah.
They just take it on. They're not scared to give it a go. With all their energy and might, and that's something that the world needs more of.
That's chutzpah wrapped up with a mindset of failure is learning, not about risk, but about learning and getting on with it, getting that urgency and speed. Those things
Exactly.
come together. I've written down your first comment to me was one of the great differences is a sense of purpose that Israelis have. My cousin, one of my cousins went to Israel a long, long time ago, and he said, "Adam, we're going because we seeking meaning and purpose, which in a material country like Australia is not the same." That's all. That's the way he put it, and I hear that through what you're saying here. And I think both Israel and Australia have been infinitely better off for having Paul Israel there at the Australia Israel Chamber of Commerce. Sorry, the Israel Australia Chamber of Commerce. We know our state government is much better off having you there. We saw that with that ARC summit. Paul Israel, as always, it is a complete treat. It's a pleasure. It's a gift to be able to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time, and may your boys stay safe and our hostages come home soon.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you, Adam.